We're back. So I thought it'd be a fun idea to go through all of the new NFL coach hires. Uh, there's 10 new hires. A lot of movement, a lot of turnover has happened in the head coaching market in the NFL. So going through those 10 and giving you who I think were the best hires and the worst hires of those 10. Not really a traditional ranking video, not going from 10 to 1, but just kind of going through who the bottom of the iceberg and then the tip of the iceberg, and who had the best hire, who had the worst hire. I'll go through my criteria before we really get into the rankings. So my first rule that I use for myself is coach experience. So how much experience does this coach have? It's very self-explanatory. Have they had experience as a head coach? Has it been good experience? Has it been positive, negative? Do they have experience as an offensive coordinator, as a defensive coordinator? How was that experience? What were their records? Where did their defense finish? Where did their offense finish? Where did their overall team finish if they were a former head coach? There are a few of those on this list. And then the situation fit. Is their scheme, is their identity a good fit for the current roster and the current culture for the team that they took over? For a lot of these guys, that was a big X or a big check for me. And then how sought after were they in the hiring process? I think this is a pretty important one, even though it's a little bit underrated. If teams are gambling, or not gambling, but competing with one another for a specific coach, and this specific coach is going to multiple interviews, and they are being sought after by almost every vacancy, then I think there's something there. I think if you get a guy that you're competing against another team for, I think it is a positive mark in your case that you were able to get that coach. So that is one of the criteria as well. So with all that being said, thank you guys for clicking on this video, and I hope you enjoy. All right, we're going to start off with a positive hire. We're going to start off with the best hire. Try to keep it on a positive note at the beginning of this. In my opinion, we'll just get this out of the way right now. The best hire of this cycle, in my opinion, is John Harbaugh to the New York Giants. I feel like this one is just a perfect fit in terms of scheme, in terms of identity, in terms of experience. He just checks all the boxes here. He was the number one candidate in this cycle without a shadow of a doubt. Every team wanted John Harbaugh as soon as he was fired from the Ravens. Everybody was jumping on that. Everybody wanted an interview. Even coaches that already had a coach, like the Dolphins, fire Mike McDaniel. Maybe it wasn't necessarily straight for John Harbaugh, but he was definitely a candidate in mind for the Dolphins when that took place. So Harbaugh was definitely the most sought after candidate, without a doubt. I think he has the most experience. I don't think he definitely does have the most experience out of every coach that was in this cycle. He's been coaching for a very long time, and he has a Super Bowl under his belt with the Ravens. So I felt like this, winning that Super Bowl and having a Super Bowl like a prestigious coach like John Harbaugh, it was just a fantastic hire for the Giants. And the Giants are a team that needs a lot of help. They need a lot of development. They have a lot of young talent on that roster that needs to be developed. And I think Harbaugh has enough experience to pull a really good staff together and to get guys like Jackson Dart and Cam Scatbo, getting these guys developed in a timely manner and having them play well immediately, as in next year. I think that's the kind of experience and the level that Harbaugh brings here. He's had multiple playoff appearances, multiple winning seasons with the Ravens. Things kind of went bad a little bit toward the end of his tenure, but even when they went bad, the Ravens weren't one of the worst teams in the NFL. They finished 8-9 and missed the playoffs. So by a game, by a field goal miss. So, Harbaugh wasn't coaching at a horrible level. He wasn't at the bottom of the league at any point, and even with being fired, he was still managing to put together decent teams. He's got a young quarterback now with a lot of potential to work with in Jackson Dart. We saw what he was able to do with Lamar. Lamar needed a lot of development and a lot of help coming out of Louisville, and I think Harbaugh played a pretty big role in getting Lamar that development, and Lamar was very upset to see Harbaugh go. So I think Harbaugh was a big factor in getting Lamar to play at the MVP level that he's been playing at, and then he's working with a pretty decent roster here. The Giants don't really have an excuse to be as bad as they are. I don't think the roster is really that terrible. Obviously, there's some glaring holes like here and there, specifically on the offensive line and maybe a little bit throughout the secondary. But I think overall, this roster isn't terrible. They have a pretty, in my opinion, a pretty stacked defensive line that's not bad at all. They have, like I said, a young quarterback with a lot of potential, a young running back with a lot of potential, a young wide receiver with a lot of potential. There's a lot of pieces to work with here with the Giants, and I think Harbaugh is the perfect coach to unlock the potential of those players. So without going on too much about John Harbaugh, I think this is more than likely going to be the best hire, the hire that ages the best out of all of them. So Harbaugh, in my opinion, is the best hire from this class. All right, now let's get negative. Let's get real negative, and let's go with the worst hire of this class, in my opinion. All just my opinion. Todd Monken to the Browns. This one was kind of a competition between Monken and Matt LaFleur with the Cardinals, but overall I decided to go with Monken here at the worst. I don't like this hire at all. I understand Cleveland was very limited on options. A lot of people were withdrawing from the head coach consideration, which is never a good sign. Mike McDaniel withdraws, Grant Udinski withdrew, and Jesse Minter all withdrew from consideration. So just didn't want the Browns job. Nobody really wanted this job, unfortunately, for Cleveland. Monken was kind of, it seemed like he was just the last option. If I were them, probably would have promoted Jim Schwartz instead of Todd Monken. Either way, it wouldn't have been a great hire, but at least Schwartz is in-house. The players know him. The players respect him. He's been a good defensive coordinator. And now you just kind of bring in Monken, and by bringing in Monken, you're going to more than likely lose Jim Schwartz now. So Jim Schwartz is more than likely going to walk. Maybe he doesn't. Who knows? But I can't imagine he's too happy about not getting the promotion and then them just going with kind of a weird lateral move with Todd Monken. But he's been with the Browns before. He was the offensive coordinator in 2019, a very bad offensive season for the Browns. He was kind of just their last choice, and he's the oldest first-time head coach in recent NFL history. I just don't see a lot of potential with this hire. Maybe Todd Monken completely proves me wrong. I hope he does. I wish the best for him. I'm not hating on him by any means. I hope he does well. I don't see a reality where that happens. I think that this was a last minute just kind of panic hire rather than an actual like sat down and a well thought out hire. I just think they didn't know what to do with all of the with all the people withdrawing and not being able to find the right guy. Now, like I said, Schwartz will more than likely leave. This just seems kind of like a messy situation. I just don't really understand it too much. And Monken, I like I said, yeah, he's got some decent experience in terms of, he's coached decent. He's coached pretty well in some of the spots he's won. He's won a national championship in Georgia. He was a pretty good coach for a certain stint in Baltimore. Baltimore was pretty happy though when Monken left. So, I don't know. We'll see how this hire ends up aging. I don't see it being a very good hire for the Browns, unfortunately. But yeah, Monken would have to be my bottom hire for this list. All right, next up, my second best hire, one of the best hires of this class, I have Kevin Stefanski. This one, is kind of interesting. Stefanski was probably the second most sought after guy in this class. The Falcons and the Giants were kind of in a bidding war for John Harbaugh almost, and Harbaugh ended up obviously going with the Giants. Falcons were a very desired destination for a new coach. They have a lot of talent on that roster that is just kind of waiting to be unlocked, I feel. And Kevin Stefanski immediately gets an upgrade from the Cleveland roster. He gets immediate upgrade from the Cleveland front office, even though Atlanta's front office isn't the best either, but almost anything, I wouldn't say anything, almost anything is an upgrade from the Cleveland front office. But Stefanski taking over the Falcons, I think this is going to work well. I think Stefanski is a perfect fit for the Falcons. I love that he starts off with a pretty loaded offense to work with. He's got Bijan Robinson, Drake London, Michael Penix. He's got maybe Kyle Pitts if they end up re-signing him. You never know. The O-line is even pretty decent there. You have some pretty good players on there. You have one of the best guards in the league in Chris Lindstrom. So there is some talent here with the Atlanta Falcons, and the fact that Stefanski knows how to run an offense, and he brought the Browns to 2 playoff berths. I'm sorry, I know the Browns keep catching a lot of strays in my explanations here, but it's just true. The Browns, that's a tough task to bring them to the playoffs twice in your coaching tenure there. That just hasn't happened too often in the modern era. So the fact that Stefanski was able to do that, I think that's a very, I think that's a big accomplishment and on his resume. And, he couldn't make a lot of the big decisions in Cleveland. They have a pretty active owner. The owner is constantly meddling, and it's a tough situation. It's similar to the Woody Johnson situation with the Jets, or the Jerry Jones situation with the Cowboys, where the owner is just hands-on. And sometimes that's not the worst thing, but in this case, it was pretty bad. It's been pretty bad for the Browns. It's been pretty bad for the Jets. It's been pretty bad for the Cowboys. So overall, he just couldn't make a lot of the big decisions. I read an article that he didn't really want Shedeur Sanders. He didn't really want to make that pick. Whether the Shedeur pick works out or not, it didn't look great in year one, but whether it works out or not, that wasn't what Stefanski really wanted to do. And he was, at the end of the day, he was one of the top candidates in this cycle. He was very heavily sought after being fired from Cleveland. I think the league understands that he was in a really bad situation, and he has one chance. He has another chance now. This is his last chance to prove himself as a head coach, and I think he'll do well. And I think the Falcons could be looking at a better season next year, depending on how fast Stefanski can get things up and running there. But overall, I think this was a really good hire from Atlanta. I think it was the next best thing. I think it was a great rebound after not getting Harbaugh, and I think this will more than likely age well, depending on how he handles some of the defensive side of the ball and who he ends up bringing in as the D coordinator. But I think offensively, he's going to have a field day with some of the players Atlanta has. And yeah, I think Stefanski was a really good hire here. So watching this part back, I realized I said Matt LaFleur for like this entire section instead of Mike LaFleur. Just to clarify, I know it's Mike LaFleur, just misspoke. His brother Matt LaFleur coaching the Packers. Very similar names, brothers, whatever, you get the point. Mike LaFleur. Anytime I say Matt, it's Mike. My bad. So next up, I mentioned him earlier, but one of the worst hires I have as Matt LaFleur. I just don't understand this hire like at all. I really don't get it. I guess it's similar to the Browns, as in the Cardinals kind of ran out of options, I guess. Not too many people really wanted the Arizona job. Not too many, up and coming coordinators really wanted to take that risk just yet. Matt LaFleur did, but it's a puzzling one because Matt LaFleur wasn't really sought after. No one was really thinking about Matt LaFleur as a potential head coach going into this year. Maybe in the future, he's been decent with the Rams as their OC, pretty good. But the problem is that Matt LaFleur isn't the primary play caller in LA. It's Sean McVay. Sean McVay is the primary play caller in LA. So you didn't even take the guy who's really running the offense. Like, LaFleur obviously has a say, and I'm sure he calls plays every now and then, and I'm sure he's involved, but he's not the main driver of that Matthew Stafford, Puka Nacua, Devontae Adams, Kyron Williams offense. That's mostly Sean McVay. So this just didn't make a whole lot of sense to me. He must have killed that interview, because I don't even think he's the best coordinator on the staff, like on the team. I think Chris Shula would have been a better hire here, and Chris Shula is a little bit more ready to take a head coaching job, as he's had more of a piece of the pie in LA, where he's controlled a little bit more. He's controlled that entire defense, really. So this one just doesn't really make a whole lot of sense to me. LaFleur just has very little experience. He's young. Not to mention, he was the Jets offensive coordinator with Zach Wilson. Whether you want to blame that on Zach Wilson or Matt LaFleur or whatever, that didn't work. So that's another F on his resume. Whether that's the Jets' fault or his, he wasn't successful there. He's been successful in LA, but like I said, not as the primary guy. And it just, like I said, just seems like the Cardinals were kind of out of options. Maybe throwing up a Hail Mary here to Matt LaFleur. I'm not sure if they interviewed Chris Shula. Maybe they did. Maybe Chris Shula didn't express interest, or I don't know. But Chris Shula obviously didn't end up taking a head coaching job, which I think is honestly a pretty smart thing to do, is just stick in LA for another year and just try to build up your resume a little bit more. The fact Matt LaFleur got a job before Chris Shula, just very surprising to me. Again, hopefully I'm wrong. I wish him the best, but I don't necessarily see this one working out either. So yeah, Matt LaFleur has to be at the bottom here for me. So overall, I feel like those were kind of the highlights of who were the best and who were the worst. There were obviously 10 hires, and those were the top two and the bottom two. But, there were some other really good hires in here. A couple honorable mentions for that I can throw in here would be Jesse Minter for one of the better hires. I thought Jesse Minter was a really good hire for the Ravens. It's a team with a lot of talent, and he's young and creative, and I think he's ready for a head coaching role, going from his experience as a coordinator, and then going from the worst side of things, another honorable mention for one of the worst hires. I did have Joe Brady here for the Bills. This has less to do with Joe Brady than it does about Sean McDermott, and I think most Bills fans agree with me. I mean, there was a petition signed about bringing back Sean McDermott. So it's less about Joe Brady, more about Sean McDermott. Joe Brady, from what I hear, is pretty respected within coaching circles, and people do think that he was ready for a head coaching job. He interviewed for a few years ago, so I mean, maybe he is ready for one. I just think it's a bad idea to fire McDermott because you can't get over the hump and then hire and then promote one of his staff. It just doesn't make much sense to me. I thought you probably could have made an outside hire, but overall, everybody else I have somewhere kind of middle of the pack on this list. But overall, thank you guys so much for watching. I hope you guys enjoyed. Consider liking, consider subscribing, and have a good one.